help with. So yeah, first question, what is mobility?
Flexibility.
Strength.
Yeah. All right, so we got flexibility plus strength. There's one piece that we're missing. Any ideas? Okay. All right, it's control. Control.
Oh.
Yeah, mobility is flexibility plus strength and control. So another way you can characterize it is its active range of motion. Whereas flexibility is passive. So with mobility, we can move ourselves into the position. Flexibility, we have to be moved into the position. So I'll take an example quickly. So let's take my wrist. So my wrist extension mobility is there. So that's how far I can move my own wrist. But my flexibility is further. So that's my mobility, that's my flexibility. This one's active, this one's passive. Cool. Yeah. All right, so when it comes to flexibility, how do we get more flexible? Any ideas?
How do we get more flexible?
Pardon?
Do we get more flexible by stretching?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stretching. And how can we make our stretching more effective?
By doing cars?
Almost, not cars. The other acronym.
Pails and rails.
Pails and rails. That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long do we need to stretch for?
A minute and a half, but 2 minutes.
Yeah. Minimum 2 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, technically 90 seconds, but I normally say 2 minutes. Or more. 2 minutes or more. Oh, sorry, this light is kind of in the way. That's better. Cool. So we get more flexible by stretching 2 minutes or more, and then our pails and rails makes that more effective. All right, good start. So what is pails and rails? Not necessarily the acronym, but just like describe what you do.
It's kind of hard to describe in words. It's easier to just kind of do it, but I guess like forcefully engaging like the isolated area, and then like basically doing the opposite with this rail.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, on the right track, Denise.
We push hard and then we pull hard.
Exactly. No, that's good. That's good. All right. So pales is contracting what's being stretched. So in any stretch, the side that's being lengthened or stretched, we contract those muscles, those tissues, and that's our pales effort. Then our rails is contracting what's being shortened. Yeah. So let's just use that wrist example again. So in this position, this side is being lengthened, and this side is being shortened. So our pales is engaging this side. So we're pushing that way. And then our rails is engaging this side. So going that way. Yeah, I'll just go over what the acronym stands for. So the P and the R stand for progressive or regressive. So progressive basically means what's lengthening. So that's why it's the pales. And then regressive means what's shortening. So that's the rails. Then A just stands for angle. I is isometric. And then L is loading. Okay. So you got the progressive angle, which is what's lengthening. You got the regressive angle, what's shortening. Isometric is a contraction where there's no movement. So, for example, a plank, if you're holding plank, it's an isometric contraction because you're squeezing your muscles, but there's no movement. That's what our pales and rails are. They're isometric contractions. And then loading just means contraction, basically. So yeah, progressive angle, isometric loading, regressive angle, isometric loading. Cool. So, and how do we do our pales and rails?
You kind of
So, like,
slowly,
apart from, we know that we do the isometric contractions, but like, how do we perform those? Like, in terms of how hard do we contract and for how long and that sort of thing.
you kind of start like slowly intensifying over time, kind of like a volume dial, starting at like 20%, and then working your way up, 50%, 80%, and then max effort.
Yeah, perfect.
And then holding that for 5 to 10 seconds maybe, and then going into rails.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah. So assuming there's no pain, you start. Yeah, you always start. I mean, yes, I say 20%, but it's just sort of a rough estimate. Start gently, in other words, and then you ramp up the intensity. As long as there's no pain, you can go to your maximum effort. And then, then you would switch immediately to your rails. But your rails, because you can't really create much force in the rails, you just go for your maximum effort from the start.
Okay.
Hey, Jason.
Hey mate, how you doing?
Good.
Sorry I'm
How are
late.
you? That's
I'm
all
good,
right.
thanks.
So we just went over kind of the definition of mobility as flexibility plus strength and control. Then we went over the difference between mobility and flexibility. So mobility is active, whereas flexibility is passive. And then we were just going over the pales and rails. Yeah.
Now Jason needs to answer all the remaining questions.
Sure.
Cool.
I like your handstand push-up progressions, Denise.
Yeah, Denise, Jason was saying, well done on your handstand push-ups, Denise.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
I saw the post.
Yeah, that felt great.
Yeah. Well done. So yeah, I was just going over the pales and rails. So the pales is contracting what's stretching, and the rails is contracting what's shortening. And yeah, it stands for progressive angle isometric loading or regressive angle isometric loading. So isometric is just a contraction where there's no movement. So say for example, with like a bicep curl, if you just hold it in one spot, that's an isometric contraction of the bicep. So yeah, pales and rails is just isometric contractions of the what's being stretched and what's being shortened. Cool, guys. So now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about cars. So yeah, what does cars stand for? Anyone?
Oh gosh. I had it in my head sort of the other day.
Control
Start with circular.
articulated. Is it
Control.
control articulator rotations? Is it?
Yeah.
That's
Almost.
yes.
Nice.
So yeah, controlled articular rotations. So articular just means joint, basically. Yeah, another word for a joint is an articulation. So it's a controlled articular rotation. I guess it works better than CJR. Yeah. So we're basically taking our joint through its full active range of motion in a controlled manner. So any pointers on how do we perform our cars? So what are the coaching cues when it comes to our cars?
I think like try to isolate the area of focus as much as possible without including other parts.
Yeah, exactly. Great answer. So you want to move each joint independently. So so no compensation. Cool. Any other answers?
Maximum. It's sort of like maximum range of motion without pain.
Yeah.
As you rotate through, it's maximum rotation without pain.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, we always want to be pain-free, not just with cars, but with all of our mobility training. Cool. Yeah. Anything else? What can
Like slow and steady.
Yeah, good. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, slow and controlled. You can go really as slow as you like and really focus in on each part of the rotation.
The other thing I would say is like it's not only rotation within the socket, but it's also rotating the limb as you're rotating the socket, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so
like
yeah,
we're not, with our knees, we're not lifting them up in a straight line and then out to the side and then back, then to the back and then down. You're actually angling. You're changing angles as you're rotating the joint, and doing your movement.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would say, yeah, especially with the shoulder and the hip. So you're like internally rotating as you actually do the rotation.
Yeah.
And same thing.
You're rotating while you rotate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way.
Because that's what our joints can do. Yeah. Cool. All right. Great answers. My next question is, why do we do cars? What are the benefits?
Um,
Increases joint mobility.
Yes, cars will improve your mobility over time, but I would say it would be more accurate to say maintain than actually increase.
Yep.
Yeah, we do our cars to maintain our range of motion or our mobility. But if you're very consistent and you do it over a long period of time, then you will actually improve your mobility because you're improving your control. Yeah, any other reasons?
to avoid injuries while working out.
Yeah, so cars, I would say cars are a great warm-up. Which can help us avoid injury. Anything else?
Well, you wrote the number 3, so I'm assuming there is.
Yeah.
Would it be to prepare the muscles and the joints for the exercise that we're about to do? Or
Yeah, but that's kind of the same as warm-up.
in that one. Okay.
But good answer, good answer.
Yeah.
So Tanner, did you
I
have
would
an
even say
idea?
it energy. Oh, go ahead, Tanner.
I was just gonna throw out range of motion, but maybe that's already maybe assumed within the first one, but improve range of motion.
Yeah, what'd you say, Jason?
I was just, it's sort of like warm up, but it isn't. So I like it. I do cars independent of any exercise because I feel that it either invigorates me first thing in the morning or it kind of relaxes me in the evening.
Cool.
Just created a number 4, Jason. Good job.
There you go. Yeah. Not what he was looking for.
No, that's okay. No, that's a great
Lee is
answer.
still there.
Yeah. So it's assessment.
Yes.
So you can use your cars to assess your mobility. So, like I look at you guys' shoulder cars and I can see, okay, you can't reach back very far at this part, so that means you're missing shoulder extension. Or I can see, okay, when we're doing this part, we tend to elevate the scapula or we tend to move the spine. So because I can see that compensation, it's showing that there's a weakness in the shoulder in terms of your shoulder mobility. So cars are a great way to assess your mobility. And when you see parts of your cars where you have these compensations or you're not getting much movement, that can indicate where you need to work on your mobility. And yeah, I guess it's sort of related to maintaining mobility, and it's related to invigorate. It feels invigorating, but your joints don't actually have circulation actually within the capsule. So say, for example, in your shoulder, the actual joint itself where the bone is in the socket, that part doesn't get any blood flow. So you need to move it to actually push the synovial fluid out, and then you kind of get new synovial fluid created, and that brings more nutrients into the joint. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so within your joint capsules,
What
you've
is
got
synovial fluid?
Pardon? Sorry, what'd you say?
He was just asking what synovial fluid was.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So it's basically just like a sort of a lubricant. It's like a fluid that your body creates within the joint capsule as, yeah, lubricant, like oil in an engine. Yeah, so everything can glide around. But yeah, there's no actual blood flow to that area. So when you move, you're flushing out the waste products, and then more nutrients can then diffuse into that area. So that's another way that it keeps your joints healthy. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's pretty much. Yeah. Okay. One more question on cars is that we've got the different levels. So we've got like our levels, level 1, 2, and 3. Do you guys remember that?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, what's our level 1 cars? What are they like?
That's just kind of like with your body weight, maybe, like no assistance.
Yeah. So
Maybe it's a bad word to use, but
there's no external load,
right.
and typically you say about 30% effort. And this is sort of like our daily routine or our morning routine. So then, yeah, what do our level 2 cars look like?
Level 2's got some resistance to it, but it's not sort of full on.
Yeah, so level 2 is typically when you have a compensation and you're trying to block that and remove it from the car. So for example, when I have you guys go up against the wall for your shoulder cars, that's a level 2 because we're blocking the spine. The spine can't move in that position. Similarly, say for example, doing your wrist cars, when you take your other hand and you hold on to your wrist to stop your elbow moving, that would be a level 2 wrist cars. It's basically, yeah, just using props, using objects to stop compensations. Yeah. And I would say the effort increases because of that. It makes it harder to do, especially if you're used to doing the compensations. And then level 3, and you guys remember level 3? We haven't done a huge amount of it really.
Is that more weighted or with under tension of some sort?
Max effort, no?
Yeah, both right. So you have, you can introduce an external load, and you're working, let's say 80% or more effort. So this is now strength training. Yeah. So say you get to a point with your cars where you don't have any pain, you don't have any compensations, then you can start to really challenge them and get stronger with your cars by adding a load. So say for example, you could hold like a really light dumbbell, like even start with just 1 pound on your shoulder cars. And you can create even more tension throughout your body. So some of you guys, I know I've given you like a yoga block to squeeze between your knees when you're doing your shoulder cars or your pails and rails, or maybe I've had you squeeze a lacrosse ball on your shoulder cars to create more tension. So yeah, level 3 is like strength training with an external load at 80% to max effort. Cool. Any other questions on cars? Cool.
No, do you structure your videos to show like the progression from level 1, 2, and 3? Like, do you have it sort of laid out so people can see like, okay, if I want to do my shoulders, I want to see what a level 1 car is, and then what the next step might be, and then what the next step might be?
So in the cars video, I explain what level 1 and level 2 and level 3 are, but yeah, I don't have much examples. Yeah, so I have like a video for each of the level 1 cars, but yeah, I haven't got a video for for the level 2 and level 3.
Yeah.
But that would be a good idea for me to work on.
I would just, I know I would find that useful, like with the shoulder stuff, right? As I start wanting to do, because you had me doing some level 2 yesterday, right? You had me, block myself up against the wall and do my shoulder rotations and stuff like that. I had no idea that was level 2. I wasn't putting that together.
Yeah.
And then the lying on your stomach with your wrist on the yoga block. I'm assuming that's probably 2 as well, isn't it? It's not really...
So that's not cars, that would be pails and rails.
And okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm not rotating through it. I'm just stretching it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But with the pails and rails, you can work at different intensities as well. But you don't really call it like a level 1, 2, or 3. It's just
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Any other questions on that part? All right.
Sorry, I have a question. Sorry, I wasn't muted. The one that you just did now with your arm against the wall, right, where you couldn't move your torso, that one would be level 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything like that you kind of neutralize other part of your body and you can't move it, that will be level 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And then, I mean, you could make that a level 3 by, you could do like up against the wall and hold a weight.
Oh, right.
That would be more of a level 3. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's not like hard and fast, but it's just sort of a general guideline. Yeah. Cool, guys. All right. All right. Next thing I want to talk about is irradiation. Do you guys remember what that is?
Radiation.
I don't.
Okay, no problem. Let me just grab my grip trainers. All right, guys, so irradiation is creating tension in the rest of your body. So say, for example, if I'm doing a bicep curl, the muscles that I'm working in that movement, maybe the bicep and the forearms, maybe a little bit of rest of the upper body. But actually by squeezing my glutes and squeezing my quads, squeezing my abs, I can actually create more force with my biceps by creating tension in the rest of my body. So same thing if we're doing, say, a back squat. if we're just very relaxed doing our squat, we won't be able to lift as heavy as if we literally squeeze every single muscle in our body and create tension. So I'm just going to use my grip trainers as example. So yeah, I've got these. You squeeze them together. So if I try to squeeze this, tilt this down. If I try to only use my forearm muscle by itself, I'm not really that strong. And even I can notice the harder I try to squeeze, the more my bicep, my tricep, my chest, my shoulder all starts to get involved. So yeah, the harder I try to squeeze this muscle, actually all these other muscles start to work as well. If I squeeze my abs, squeeze my quads, glutes, make a fist with my other arm, if I create tension in my whole body, then I can close it. And this is one of the easier ones, but you really notice it more with the harder ones. So let's see. Got the number one here, which is pretty tough. So yeah, if I'm just relaxed with the rest of my body and I try to close this, it's not happening. But if I create all that tension in the rest of my body, I was just about able to close that one.
That's what Pavel Serene says for doing pull-ups.
Who said that? Sorry.
Pavel Tatsurine, he's the kettlebell guy. Yeah. He talks about getting hard for your pull-ups, and you make yourself like completely rigid as a plank, rather than just hanging dead weight. You gotta like tense up your entire body and do pull-ups.
Yeah. I read his book actually. Yeah, one of his books. Yeah, it's a good one. So yeah, radiation is actually really powerful. So whenever you're doing your strength training, I would recommend, and the best way to do it is kind of go from your core to your extremities. So that's why I often say when we're doing maybe a pails and rails, sometimes I'll say like, take a deep breath, squeeze your abs, and then kind of build from there into your pails and rails. But ask any power lifter if they're doing like their bench press. They're actually driving their feet into the ground, squeezing their glutes, squeezing their abs, and that actually helps them with their bench press. So we can use this in our strength training, but we can also use it in our mobility training. So when we're doing our cars, say our daily routine, create a little bit of tension in the rest of your body. So just engage those abs, maybe make a fist with your other hand as you go through that shoulder car. That's going to help you keep those other body parts still, stop the compensation, but it's also going to help you create more force as you're doing your shoulder car. So you can actually get maybe a slightly better rotation. Same thing with your pails and rails. The more tension you can create with the rest of your body, the more force you can create with your pails and rails, and that's going to make it more effective. So yeah, that's what irradiation is. Any questions on that part?
No.
Cool. All right. All right, so yeah, we've talked about pails and rails, cars, irradiation. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our end range strength training. So yeah, once we've got enough flexibility, so we've got our passive range of motion, then we want to try to make that active. So yeah, we've done some of this in the more recent sessions, Do you guys remember any of the types of exercises you do to create that strength and control in your end range? Any ideas?
You're just looking for examples, David, like of anything we've done?
Yeah, so basically, yeah. You could give me like a specific example for a specific joint, or if you remember the name of what those exercises are called.
Well, specifically, I guess just for the wrists that we go over with the weights, so weighted wrist curls. So that's basically with the weight, you know, curling up as far as you can, and then the other way is just curling it. You know.
Yeah, that's a good example. Let me see. Yeah, that is an example of where we're trying to build strength throughout our full range of motion. But let's say, all right, well, yeah. I'll give you guys the first one. So it's called a passive range hold. Do you guys remember those passive range holds?
Yeah.
Cool. So basically, you take a joint to its passive end range, and then you try and hold it there.
With something else, not just necessarily on its own, right? So like if I'm doing internal rotations, I'm actually pushing it down to keep it there at its maximum, rather than me trying to keep on forcing it down, though, right?
Yeah, so I'll use my hip as an example for hip extension. Sorry, no, hip flexion. So I would grab my leg, pull it to its end range, passive, then let go and try to hold it. Then we can do reps on that. So take it to your end range, let go, try and hold. So that's our passive range hold. Yeah, so I think we've done some in class with the ankles and the wrists, where you like push your knee forward over your ankle as far as you can, then you try to lift your foot and then you lean back until your foot lifts. That's an example of a passive range hold. Or similar with the wrists on the floor, you kind of like lean forwards and then engage, and then come back until your hand lifts. Yeah. So this is kind of the first simplest step to take our passive range of motion and make it active. Yeah. So the next one is our lift offs. Yeah, so this is where we're very close to our end range. So say, for example, I think we've done some where we're lying on our stomach and we lift off the block and then go back down. So you're really close to your end range, and then you're just trying to build strength and control in that end range of motion. Yeah. You guys remember those? Yeah, I think I've definitely done some with Tanner.
I've done lift offs with the shoulder cars. So with the shoulder stuff, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So then the next one is hovers. So that would be, whereas a lift off might be in one direction. So we're just going up, down, up, down. A hover would be going over an object. Or for example, maybe you're lying on your stomach, arm on the floor, and then you lift up over a block and then over to the other side. Lift up, over to the other side. So this is now adding even more control into that. end range. And then finally, we've got our end range rotations. So yeah, that would be, rather than hovering over an object back and forth, you literally lift up and make very small circles right in your end range. Yeah. So these progress from easier to more difficult. So these passive range holds, these are actually an isometric contraction. So it's almost similar to your pails, except you've taken away whatever was pushing you into the stretch. So this is isometric. And isometric contractions are the easiest contractions to do, because all you have to do is just squeeze and try to hold it. Then our lift offs, that's when we start to add in the concentric portion as well. And yeah, just so concentric is when you're shortening, eccentric is when you're lengthening, and then isometric is staying still. Yeah. So with the bicep here, this is a concentric, eccentric. Or like with a deadlift, when you stand the deadlift up, that's concentric, and then the way down, that's the eccentric on the deadlift. So yeah, lift offs are starting to add in the concentric and eccentric into that end range. Then the hovers makes it more difficult, because instead of just working in one line of motion, you're starting to move back and forth. And then the end range rotations are the most difficult, because they require the most control. Yeah. So yeah, going back to our definition of mobility, which is flexibility plus strength and control. First, we need to get that flexibility. So we do our stretching, we do our pails and rails. Then once we've done stretching and we've got to the point where we have enough flexibility, which can take weeks, it can take months, it can take a long time. That's when we now want to start to make that active range of motion and start doing these exercises. Yeah. And this is going to make us stronger in those end ranges. Any questions on that stuff, guys?
Not for me, mate.
No.
Cool. And yeah, a lot of you guys don't even have the flexibility that you require in certain joints. So that's why we haven't done so much of this stuff yet. Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're almost done, guys. My next question for you is, how do injuries happen? Any ideas?
What's the question again?
How do injuries happen?
Too much load?
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. It's when load is greater than capacity. So
And do you define load in multiple ways?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be a large load in a short period of time, or it can be a smaller load over a long period of time. So, and that would be the difference between acute and chronic. So an acute injury is, say, for example, you get in a car crash and you break a leg. There's just a large amount of force that went into the side of your leg, and the tissues in your body couldn't withstand the force. Yeah. It could also be, say, for example, you go over on your ankle and you strain or sprain your ankle. It's sort of like a one-off incident that caused an injury. A chronic injury is load, but over a long period of time. So this could be, think of like maybe a tendonitis, and you say you're squatting heavy every single day for like a month or two, and then all of a sudden your tendon is starting to get really inflamed and painful. That would be more of a chronic injury. That's how you categorize it. Yeah, that's just one example.
Just
Yeah.
like running as well, right? Running
Yeah.
or something like that. You know, you're not used to it. You up your mileage too quickly, and you know, next thing you know, you've got some sort of issue in your legs somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. It could be like the feet, the shins, the hips, knees. Yeah.
Ankles, knees, yep.
Yeah, exactly. That would fall more into chronic. So acute
That's
is
me.
like a large load in a short amount of time creates an injury. Chronic would be too much load over a longer period of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this is how injuries happen. So how can we become more resilient and more resistant to injuries? We got two options. Or how can we avoid an injury?
I'm looking at your formula. Sorry, I keep talking to you guys. You guys go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead, Jason. But yeah, if anyone else
I'm
wants
just
to.
saying, I'm looking at the formula, and it would be to increase capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So your two options are you can increase your capacity, and the other option, which I would argue is a worse option, but it is necessary sometimes, is to decrease load. Yeah. So yeah, to prevent injury, you can either decrease load or increase capacity. So decreasing load is things like, okay, you got injured running, so you just stop running and you never run again because it's bad for your knees. Some people say that. Another example might be like just stop lifting weights altogether. Or every time you pick something up, you have to keep your back completely straight. Or say, for example, like lift with your legs, not your back. So those are all examples of decreasing load to prevent injury. But yeah, what do you think the problem with those solutions are? And yeah, this is definitely has its place and it's necessary at times to reduce load, but I would argue that that's not something you want to do forever. So yeah, what would be the downsides to sort of this solution to the problem? Go ahead, Denise. Please.
You would stop doing what you like because
Yeah, exactly. That's one big reason. Yeah, you basically have to kind of give up doing things that you enjoy. Yeah. Yeah, you have to, I'll just put not fun. Yeah, what's another, anyone think of another reason?
I was going to say you never get stronger.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually going to make us weaker. And it's actually going to lower your capacity. So you're going to become even easier to get to injure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your load has to be incrementally increased so that you can increase your capacity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's where training smart is very important. So yeah, the other option, which I think is the better option, is we increase our capacity to resist load, resist force on our joints. But let's take a look at a joint. All right, so this axis is going to represent our range of motion. So because it's easy, let's just take the bicep. So starting right here, this is when our bicep is fully lengthened. And then over here is when our bicep's fully contracted. Now this axis represents how strong our bicep is in those positions. So we tend to be weakest at our end range and strongest in our mid range. So if you take our bicep, we're weaker in this sort of area, and then we get really strong in the middle, and then we're weaker in this area. And if we're thinking about injuries, we're more likely to get injured over here and over here. Does that make sense? Yeah? So one way to become more resistant to injury is to get stronger in our end ranges. And that's what mobility training is. So if we can take this curve and make it look more like this, then we can absorb more force throughout the whole range of motion, and it's going to be harder for us to get injured. Yeah. The other thing is, when we get stronger in a certain range of motion, there's actually benefits 20% to each side of that. So if I get stronger in my end range, it's actually going to, if I get stronger here, it's actually going to make me stronger here as well. Or if I get stronger here, it's going to make me stronger here. If we're only getting stronger in the middle, then we're only kind of strengthening this middle part, and we're still going to be weak at the end ranges of motion. Yeah, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Great, yeah. So that's how mobility training can help us prevent injury. So say, for example, in our squat, as we get stronger and more control right at the bottom of our squat, so you could say that's like our end range of our ankles and our hips. Yeah. Our body is going to be able to create more force in that position, and it's going to be less likely that we're going to get injured in that position. And same thing, say, for example, with our wrists. If we get stronger in our end range of wrist extension, we're going to be able to resist more force, produce more force there. And so, say, for example, if we fall over, our body is okay, like I can actually handle this position. And you're never going to be able to, say, completely avoid injury. But if your wrist has no mobility and it never goes in this position, and then you fall on the ground and put your hand down,
Yeah.
It's not going to be able to resist that force, right?
Right. It will be harder to.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing, say, for example, if take your ankle, if you strengthen this position, so doing your cars, even doing like some pails and rails, even actually strength training this movement in the ankle. When you like go over on the ankle, it's going to be able to resist that force a lot better. So maybe you'll get a less severe injury than you otherwise would have got. Cool. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Cool, cool. And then, yeah, one last thing. Yeah. So when it comes to like training smart and avoiding injury, so making sure that we're not overloading our joints, how are some ways that we can do that? Yeah, so one great way is variation. So one of my criticisms of CrossFit would be you do the same movements the same way all the time. So every time you do a pull-up, you normally have the same grip. Every time you do a box step up, like that crazy workout where it's 1,000 box step ups, you're doing the box step up over and over the same way. If we actually make slight changes and variations to how we do movements, then we're actually working slightly different tissues and different muscles in different ways. So it's less likely that we're going to injure that one particular joint, and we're actually going to get stronger throughout a greater range of motion. So some ways we can do that is, let's just take the pull-up, for example. You can do your palms facing forwards. You can do your palms facing towards you. You can do a mixed grip. You can go narrower, you can go wider. If I just do pull-ups the same way, the same grip every single time, I'm only going to be strong doing pull-ups in that one position. And also, if I do, say, for example, 100 pull-ups the same way, then it's the same muscles in the same position working over and over. And that's when you can get those chronic injuries. So that's why sometimes I think some CrossFit workouts are probably unsafe for some people and definitely increase the risk of injury because you're doing the same movement the same way over and over. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And then another thing is you have to vary your intensity.
David, I've got to get going, bud.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this has gone a bit late.
No worries, mate. Take care, guys.
Yeah. Cool. Bye, Jason.
Bye.
Yeah, sorry, guys. This will be kind of like the last point. We can't always train at max intensity. If you try to lift heavy, the same movement every single day, that's definitely going to increase your risk of injury. So, I mean, once or twice a week at a high intensity is definitely enough for each movement. If you want to do a movement more often than twice a week, then that third time that you do it, it has to be lower intensity. You're either going to get injured or you're just going to plateau because your body's not able to recover and adapt. Yeah. And yeah, I guess you could also put rest in there. It's really important for avoiding injury. All right, guys. Yeah, sorry that went on such a long time. But yeah, I wanted you guys to get a good understanding of everything. So yeah, did you guys have any questions?
That's very educational. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was great. Good, really good reminder of the fundamentals of what we've gone over. So